Hello creative shrimps, Gleb Alexandrov here, welcome to yet another very exciting Blender tutorial. Today we indulge in creating a fake fog effect in Eevee. This is one of these super efficient two-dimensional techniques that would run on any computer and that look very cool indeed, and it works with the mesh lights. So without a further delay, let's get started. First of all, why even bother with setting up a 2D haze when we have volumetric shaders in Blender? Of course, that's a fair question. We could have just gone ahead and do it in a regular way. Let's say this is the scene we wanted to add some haze to. This is my dead body lying around. Just a regular, innocent 3D scene. The way we would have normally done it is obviously going over to the World tab of the shader editor first. It needs to say World, then Shift A and drop in the principled volume material. That would go into the volume socket of the shader. The caveat is the volumetric shaders in Eevee don't really interact with the mesh lights, making them much less impressive when working with such scenery. Yes, it does obfuscate the distance, but it doesn't truly work with the mesh lights. In Cycles though, on the other hand, the volume shaders do interact with the mesh lights, behaving pretty much as you would expect, generating a fancy light scattering effect near the objects emitting light, like here and here, and it also absorbs the light, devouring the details in the distance, making it possible to clump the light near the bright sources and all that stuff. It would be great to mimic it in Eevee, and even customize it some more, right? So let's switch back to Eevee and just keep rocking. Right, everything is ready. Are you ready? Some shortcuts first. Shift F5 enables the 3D viewport and Shift F3 gets us to the shader editor. I'll be using these two quite often throughout the tutorial, so I thought it was worth mentioning. I'm going to switch the mode of the shader editor to object, as we'll be using it to tweak our fake fog materials. Now in the outliner within the blend file that you have downloaded for sure, you'll find these folders, 2D fog source and 2D beam source. That is important as I set up some useful stuff in there for us to use. These objects, basically. We are in the solid shading mode in the top window, by the way. What we need to do now is just clone this plane with the help of the Shift-D shortcut and move it into the camera view like this. It should look like a fireball of something, a glowing sprite basically. I'll make it a bit smaller as well. Alright. In a moment I will walk you through the material tweaks we need to make, but for now, if you need to see this object in the viewport, make sure to check the UI visibility there. If you want to be able to select this transparent plane in the viewport, in the camera view I mean. In the top view, I'll toggle the X-ray mode on to see through these planes, as in a moment we'll add many such planes and the viewport will get a bit busy. So it's, better be prepared. The 2D fog material, how does it work? How can we make it look like an actual fog? The way the material is structured is this. Let me make some room for the node work. First of all, we have a texture driving this effect. Then we have these two nodes for tweaking its gradient or fall off. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and click the 2 max field and reduce it, lowering the opacity of the material this way. I'll change it to something like 0.005, so it becomes more of a haze rather than a fiery Pokemon form. To control how the opacity falls off near the edges, we can make use of this curve both of the points. Feel free to play with it. I'll keep it intact for now. Then we have these nodes and shaders at the bottom, out of which you'd be mostly interested, I think, in changing the strength of the effect. Basically, how glowy do you want it to look? That's the emission shader strength, in other words. And what color do you want it to possess? This is controlled by these two nodes. It can be any color, obviously. Basically, the node that says base color is meant for controlling it. The color noise node is kind of interesting. The factor is meant to mimic the so-called color contamination. Lights of different temperatures tend to mix in within the fog volume, effectively mixing with each other and cross-contaminating some areas of the fog. If you set the slider to 0, it will show no such cross-contamination. It will be just one pure color, and one conversely will add a little bit of a rainbow-hued effect. And that is pretty much all we need to know about this 2D fog material. As you can see, it's not that complex at all, really. It may seem a little bit daunting at first, but it isn't, in fact. Just take it easy. As we have already duplicated the source plane, I'll give it a new collection with the M shortcut for Move to Collection. I won't bother with naming too much this time. Whatever name Blender assigns to the object after copying it out, basically. We need to give it a unique material, though. I'll open the Materials tab and click this icon to create a new material, basically. I'll just delete the source part from its name, I think, to not accidentally mistake it for the original instance. Now I'll press G to move, and what I want to do now is simulate the light scattering near the neon sign, near the brightest neon sign at the storefront, as it's the most luminous object here, and stretching it on the local x-axis with the help of the S and then X twice, like this, making it way wider like that. I'll disable the user interface in this bottom window by clicking this icon next and go straight into the shader editor. Shift F3. The color. The color should probably match the color of the mesh light underneath it to not look out of place. So even though technically it can be of any hue imaginable, I'll try to eyeball the warmer shades of red and orange, imitating the colors beneath, I guess. You got the point. Now, essentially, we need to repeat these steps for every object we want. Just try to not intersect any geometry. It's not good when it happens, because it breaks the illusion. Alright, the second one will be for the storefront. It also will be a short and wide plane, mostly scattering light, imitating the scattering rather. The tint can use a little bit of variation to keep it fresh this time, not too far away from the orange base color of the windows ideally. I'll also tame its strength a bit like this, swoosh, so it blends nicely. The X-ray mode is really helpful, as you can see. We would have run into trouble with all these planes we are going to have soon in our viewport. That would be really unfortunate without X-ray. The next one will be for this sign in the foreground. It usually takes some time to land it properly, but once you get a hang of it, it's not that bad. Notice how big the plane is in comparison to the sign itself, as this effect needs some space to fall off gracefully. Okay, after assigning it a unique material, I'll go down its settings right here, as we can do it here without switching the view to material editor actually. This color, I think, needs to be the pale green, like that. As for the strength, not too high definitely. Just a little bit of bloom. Alright, something like that makes sense. If you want to check how it looked before, the eye icon in the outliner is at your service. That definitely added a bit of a foggy flavor to this part. I love it. Next, I will Shift D again for copying this plane out to cover the second sign. Scaling it up and down to find the sweet spots. I really dig the extra glow, like some light is scattered around indeed. Next, I'll just keep covering the brightest spots, like this lamp. Notice once again that the color should better be close to that of the emitter. I mean, it can differ within the reasonable constraints of realism. Generally, it's better to be careful about such things though. It's fairly easy to slip up and break the illusion when you're dealing with such 2D effects. The rest of the street lamps should be fairly easy to cover. Shift D duplicates the plane. Then we can use the G, R and S shortcuts in Blender for move, rotate and scale, as you know for sure. That is a pretty easy part of the workflow, even though it takes some time. As the Irish saying goes, when God created time, he made plenty of it. It feels like we never have enough of it though. As we know, the atmospheric media should not only disperse but also absorb the light, effectively obfuscating the objects in the distance and making the whole thing dimmer, so that is what I want to do next. A new collection for it, for the background fog basically. Now what we need to do is, once again, pick one of these planes that we have already created. And make a copy using Shift D shortcut once again. I'll make it really big this time, so it covers the entire view when we place it at the back of this scene like that. This will be our background fog. It needs to cover the entire camera view. M to move it to the background layer now and give it a new material as well. Click this icon as usual. For this one, I will adjust the color of the transparent shader. Let's make it way darker. Click. Swoosh. Let's see. Whoops! Aha! The edge showed up. Let's move the edge out of the way like this. Okay, that became quite moody, and I like it a lot actually. It looks great. The effect comes to life really. Well, there's probably not enough scattering just yet. The absorption is there though, intensifying the mysterious setting. I just love it. One fairly important component is still missing, and that is what we will do in the next section. For now, I'm just still playing with the emission strength for this effect, simulating the distant city lights or something, punching through the fog. One important component of the fog effect is still missing, and it is more light scattering, and more, how should I put it, general type of scattering, not the effects of the particles getting lit near the bright sources, but just an overall hazing, if that makes sense. It will also be located in the foreground, so I'll give it a new layer, calling it foreground for that matter. Let me make the camera view a little bit bigger. Shift F5 to get into the 3D viewport, and I'll just grab one of these planes. This one, for example, and Shift D it, then G to move it so it's basically in front of everything else. Beware the intersections though. If the fake 2D planes with fog intersect any geometry, it produces this kind of obvious transition. That is not good. Now, depending on where we put it, we can simulate different ways or even different directions in which the light gets scattered in our imaginary fog. It almost reminds me of the anisotropy slider in some way, in the volumetric shader, you know? I want the top portion of the frame to have this kind of height-based mist, like that. And now I'll give it a unique material and transport it to the foreground layer with the help of the M shortcut. By the way, I think I forgot to mention quite an important thing. In order for such transparent objects to show up in Eevee, the blending mode within the material settings should be changed to alpha blend, because by default the materials show as opaque. Basically, it won't work if you don't choose the right blending mode, in case you're creating a shader like that from scratch. Alpha hashed could also work in some cases, but it's kind of noisy, so alpha blend is generally the way to go. The shadow mode doesn't interest us too much this time. Alright, I thought it would be cool to play with the contrast of warm and cold light mixtures, making this foreground mist scatter a cooler part of the spectrum, as if. The most important thing is that it looks amazing, this type of contrast. So I'm going with the pale blue color this time, a pretty desaturated mixture. Okay. Do we need some extra variety in colorization? It is interesting, in my opinion, so why not? I'm gonna set the factor which controls the noisiness of the color, or the extra colorization, to something like, I don't know, maybe something close to the middle, like that. As for the fog brightness, aka strength, I'll probably dim it down like that. And yeah, just adjusting a few things here and there. With tweaking the strength, we can make it look almost like the different times of day. Now it looks like a typical Silent Hill at night type of shot. Based on the levels, it is pretty clear that that is the night indeed. As the next thing on our to-do list, we can actually take care of the more directional light scatter imitation. In our outliner, we should have not only the 2D fog source, but also the 2D beam source. Let's make a new collection for the beams. Here we go. Then we need to locate this beam object, almost a triangle. How this figure is called, let me know in the comments, and copy it out. Full points if anyone says isosceles trapezoid. It will be the beam coming out of the street lamp, as if the light is more focused and has some directionality to it, lighting up the fog particles on its path. Something like that. It's pretty tricky to position it right. The strength shouldn't be over the top, obviously. It's not the thickest fog and not the strongest lamp anyway. Be careful to not overdo it, in other words. The effects like this, when overdone, doesn't look cool. So just carefully tweaking the strength to make it barely visible. Then we can scale it on the x-axis once again, if needed. S and X twice scales it on the local x-axis, making it wider or narrower. But yeah, it looks good as it is. And it's the same story. Shift D, make a copy, move it to the new object, rinse and repeat. Thankfully, there are just 3 such lights. It shouldn't take a whole lot of time to cover all of them. Don't forget about creating a new version of the material, if any tweaks are needed with each new 2D plane. And you should be good to go. The third lamp, I'll just fast track the process a bit to not bore you. And finally, I'll move these 3 guys into their beams collection. Okay. As you can see, with all these 2D plane shenanigans, the viewport has become a total mess. If it was cycles, we would have used a trick to make it cleaner. We would have lightened it up by changing the display mode in the viewport display settings to bounds or wire. Unfortunately, it makes the object invisible for Eevee rendering, so it won't work in our case. We just need to take a breath and accept the chaos. Chaos is a ladder. Now when the all effects has been sprayed out, it's totally okay to polish it up with the true volumetric effect on top of it. One of the ways it's done in Blender is via the world shader. So let's switch to the world tab of the shader editor, then Shift A for adding a new node, and drop the principled volume shader in there. In Eevee, it would really just be an absorption. Nothing more. As we have mentioned, the mesh lights don't interact with the fog material in Eevee, but it is okay, as we have simulated the rest of the stack, the scattering, the directional scattering even. So the distance-based absorption will help cover the sharp transition between the ground and the sky, among other things. And this pretty much concludes the fog setup we were going for. For me, it looks pretty convincing, actually, as long as no intersections are visible at least. And it runs fast. Thinking about it, the bloom and glare effects are also quite literally light scattering, be it inside the lens or in the atmosphere. And one of the easiest tweaks ever for this kind of stuff is just enable the goddamn bloom effect in Eevee. Let's go. The threshold obviously filters out the pixels below this level of brightness, and we can make a variety of looks, including this very diffused one resembling the black prom mist filter or something. I wouldn't want to give it a dreamy look though, via the excessive use of the bloom, so I'll stick to the moderate, or actually really low intensity rather, and a moderate radius as well. That adds a little bit of an extra diffusion, and that is pretty much it. Before wrapping it up, as a quick bonus I'll show how it would look in cycles without tweaking anything. So I'm gonna go ahead and just turn on our beloved path tracing engine in the render settings. It will just work with our setup. The volumetric shader would increase its realism due to the advanced light calculations and so on, but generally it would look pretty much the same. The fun thing is that our 2D fog shenanigans would also work straight out of the box. It really makes this technique universal, working in both render engines. That is amazing. But after all, this is supposed to be the Eevee tutorial, so before wrapping it up, I'm gonna switch it back to Eevee. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on creating a super efficient two-dimensional fog in Eevee. Hopefully this accessible method will allow artists with varying hardware capabilities to integrate fog into their scenes, enhancing the overall look and realism. I thank you for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to press the like button and subscribe to this channel. I would really appreciate that. If you want to watch more of such tutorials, feel free to visit creativeshrimp.com and check our courses as well. Recently we have released the cinematic lighting course with a big nighttime lighting update, so make sure to check it out as well. Drink more coffee and we will change the world of computer graphics one day.